let's talk some about the prophets to the northern kingdom. Hosea is one of the I suppose the most prominent prophet to the northern kingdom in terms of those who have written books. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this chart on page 32. But it'll be a good study outline for you. I've got a couple of other charts that are going to help us to understand Hosea a little more. But remember, here's this formula. The word of the Lord came unto Hosea. Now, if you're reading those Sederim, remember, and they just all kind of run together, but you know that the 21 Sederim of what we call the the minor prophets are all one book. How in the world did they know that now you've got Hosea's part? Well, here's this pattern. The word of the Lord came. The word of the Lord came. And so you're reading along. The word of the Lord came to Jonah. The word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time. The word of the Lord. And so as you're in a Jewish congregation, you would say, let's open our scrolls to when the word of the Lord came to Hosea. And again, everybody knows this is how to find that. This is where it is. And are able to go there. So the word of the Lord came unto Hosea and told him some very interesting things, as you see beginning in Hosea chapter 1, verse 2. There's a little bit of dating that's given to there. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. The Lord said, "Go take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms." This is not going to be good for the Pastor Search Committee interview. Yet this is the instruction that is given that he is to carry out. And so he has, beginning in verse 2 and going through chapter 2, the first wife and then the second wife. And there's some symbolism that is given here. Now, when I say symbolic, I don't mean that it didn't happen in history. I think that this is exactly what took place in history, what he was asked to do. But what he was asked to do was for the reason of symbolism. And this is the reason, you may remember, that Moses was not allowed to go into the promised land because he hit the rock. He struck the rock instead of spoke to the rock, which always seems to me like a little bit of an excessive punishment that is given, because the other time he was supposed to strike the rock and he did, so he just struck the rock twice instead of strike and speak. But when you understand this rock is Christ, that we don't understand until the New Testament, there is some symbolism that is given there that the rock has been struck once, and after it's struck once, you only speak to the rock to receive its blessing, its living water. So it was a symbol of Christ crucified once for all. And once he has been crucified, you come to him and whosoever will, and you can ask. And so there's a symbolism that is given. Now, Moses didn't know that this was symbolism, and I don't know if Hosea knew that, hey, this is symbolic here. All I know that he knew is go and take thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed a great whoredom. And that he's supposed to go and take this wife that is symbolically going to tell us some things. Jeremiah was one. Ezekiel was one. A number of times, I think, was it Jeremiah that I preached on a few weeks ago? I should know. Who I preached on a few weeks ago? In the 30 biblical people, and I think it was Jeremiah, wasn't it, that had to lay on his side, for 300-something days, and then turn over and lay on his other side, and he had to take his hair and shave it off and burn part of it and throw part of it in the air and chop part of it up, and all of that was symbolic. Well, he knew it was symbolic, because what else could it be? But here, what Hosea knew, I don't know, but he's just supposed to be obedient because this is symbolic. I do want to just throw in this little word right here that God is not asking you to do something symbolic today, unless it is perhaps take the Lord's Supper or something of this nature that's prescribed for us in Scripture. But don't get the idea that, hey, I'm supposed to go take 2 or 3 wives because God has asked me to give a symbol. He's living in prophetic days. God's speaking to him, telling him what to do. So he carries it out. Then there's some literal prophecy that's given where this is a kind of prophecy where, the word of the Lord came to Hosea and said, 1, 2, 3, 4, here's the outline, here's the incriminations and the resolve to return, the incriminations and the invitation to return, and concluding with, the ways of the Lord are right. Now, that, especially when you look at here, you might say, the ways of the Lord don't seem so right. But there is the stamp of approval on here, the ways of the Lord are right. There's just a general outline of the book of Hosea. And I want to spend time looking at his children here, who are symbolic even in their name. And we look at Jezreel, first of all, in chapter 1, verses 4 and 5. Let's go ahead and read these. The Lord said unto him, call his name Jezreel for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and I will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. And it shall come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. So he names the child Jezreel. There is the valley of Jezreel, then named after that, or he's named after the valley. It's hard telling here which came first. But the valley of Jezreel today, does anyone know what we call it? The valley of Jezreel. It's actually what the Jewish people call it, is the valley of Jezreel. We typically call it, somebody over here said, Armageddon, the valley of Armageddon. It's the same valley. So here is Jezreel, who is, the meaning is may God scatter or may God sow, because it's an agricultural valley. So it has to do with planting, and yet planting in the picture of the old way of farming where you were scattering seed, throwing it out. So name him, I'm going to throw out the seed. The picture is, this is what's going to happen to Israel, that they're going to be scattered about. And today we call Israel the lost tribes, the 10 tribes. They're scattered. They're all over the place. So here's Jezreel. Lo Ruhamah, verses 6 through 9. Speaks of Job's wife, says, she conceived again and bare a daughter, and God said unto him, call her name Lo Ruhamah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. Lo is the Hebrew word for no, or not. Not Ruhamah, not mercy. I'll no longer have mercy upon Israel. I'll utterly take them away, but I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. Now when she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. Now, let me stop right there in verse 7. So here is Lo Ruhamah, this second child. Not beloved or no mercy am I going to give to Lo Ruhamah. Let's look up, for example, Romans chapter, what is the verse there? 225? 925. Which... it's actually just the quote here. As he has said in Osi, that's the Greek version of Hosea, I will call them my people, which are not my people. I will call her beloved, which was not beloved. Not beloved. Lo Ruhamah is the word we have here. So no mercy, no love. God's not going to show any compassion upon Israel, but he is going to show compassion upon Judah. And then Lo Ami, verses 8 and 9 in Hosea chapter 1. Says, now when she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. God said, call his name Lo Ami. Lo means not, no or not. Not Ami, for ye are not my people. Anyone want to guess what Ami means? People, that's right. If we see here, Well, okay, there we go. Is people. Is my people. You put an I, it makes it possessive. So lo ami, not my people. And I will not be your God. And here is this picture of the fact that God is going to reject Israel and he is going to remove himself from her. Now, with that, let's move on to the next slide, which is the one I want to spend just a little bit more time on. And this verse, especially in Romans 9:25 that we've looked at, 24 and 25, I will call them my people which were not my people. We in the Christian church read ourselves into that verse. It is eisegesis, or maybe narcigesis, whichever you want to call it. It's finding and reading myself into. And so in Romans chapter 9, verses 24 and 25, he says, even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews also, but not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles, for it says in Hosea, I will call them my people, which were not my people. Now, who is he talking about? A very common interpretation of these two verses is the Jews are lo ami and the church is ami. The Jews are no longer my people, now the church is my people. And how common is it? I would venture to say that if you go to just about any commentary other than the ones we may have over here, and you read on Romans chapter 9, it's going to say the church is now the people of God. There's the Jewish people are no longer the people of God. Now the church is the people of God. In fact, if you have a study Bible, you might even look and see, I haven't looked to see what Schofield had to say on that particular note, but I'm sure he didn't say this. It's one of those verses, if you want to know, I talk sometimes about the tattletale verses. If you want to get a tattletale on someone to see if they're replacement theology, get them to explain this verse right here. Now, the one disclaimer I'm going to give to this is you might ask your pastor and he will just regurgitate what he's heard in seminary. So he might not be replacement theology, he might just be dumb. Not well studied, I think we should say. That it may just be that, he doesn't know this. And unfortunately, we pastors are bane to say, I don't know. Let me study that. So, he may just, the standard answer, his answer is going to tell you either he's a solid dispensationalist and understands the word, or he regurgitates what's in seminary, or maybe he actually believes that which is in seminary, and some of those latter two are a little hard to discern. But I tell you what, if he's a younger guy, give him the benefit of the doubt and then work on him. If he's an older guy and new in the ministry, give him the benefit of the doubt and work on him. If he's an older guy that's been a pastor for 45 years, probably the benefit of the doubt is already gone. So, are the Gentiles now God's people? Or is it still the Jews that are God's, or who is God's people? Now, even us whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. I think this even us whom he hath called is the key phrase. Who is chapter 9, verse 24 talking about? It is talking about us whom he hath called. Well, remember that Romans 9, 10, and 11 is about whom? It's about the nation of Israel. And the nation of Israel is, especially in this context, and I would say just about anywhere really, the nation of Israel is us whom he hath called. Now, it's this next phrase that throws us off here a little bit, but here we've got, again, let me just reiterate what it says here. The entire chapter has been exclusively about the elect nation without one word about elect individuals. So this is not talking about me and you whom he hath called. This is talking about the nation of Israel, the Jews whom he hath called, not only of the Jews, but also of the Gentiles. Now, here's where I think that our English translations have not helped us one bit, and it doesn't really matter which English translation you go to, they all have about the same thing here. So us whom he hath called are not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. Now in English that means what? That means there's Gentiles and there's Jews that are us whom he hath called, right? And Gentiles are non-Jews, and Jews are Jews. So you read this in English, and it's very clearly saying in the English language that both Jews and Gentiles are us whom he hath called, and it must be these Gentiles who were once lo a me, not my people, and now they are my people. And the challenge with that is you can put a number of different scriptures together and say, well, the church is neither Jew nor Gentile, or the church is, like I've been teaching in the book of Ephesians, chapter 3, the Gentiles, chapters 2 and 3, the Gentiles were once afar off, they were not welcomed in, and now they have been brought in, now they're joint heirs. And so you put this with Ephesians. The problem is this doesn't go with Ephesians. This is in Romans chapter 9, which is exclusively about the nation. So how in the world do you put this together? Well, if you were reading in the Greek, it doesn't say not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. In fact, both the word Jew and Gentile are anachronisms, or I usually say anacronyms, but I'm not sure that's right. But the word means when you use a word outside of its time. So you take chronos, anachronos. Chronos is time, and ana is again time. So you take a word outside of its time. So you talk about George Washington, who went home one evening and he was hungry, and so he put his cherry pie into the microwave and warmed it up. Now, you laughed because that's an anachronism, because microwave doesn't belong with George Washington. It's something that you can only start using in, the 1970s? I don't know, a man radar range. And that, from there on, you can use microwave all you want. But you can't go before that and use that. Now, Jew is a word that came about much later. Obviously, the English language came about much later, but the word Jew in the English language means any child of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? It's this descendant that they are Jew, or maybe they're the religion of the Jew, but nonetheless, you'd put all that together and say, that's what a Jew is. So we read that, and that's what we read. The problem is, that's not the word there, because there was no word Jew in the New Testament. In Greek, they didn't have the word Jew. If they were talking about a Jew, they would talk about the circumcised. That's right. So that was their word, the circumcised. That's the Jew. So what it says in the Greek is not Jew. What it says is Judean. Judean. So a Judean was literally someone who lived where? In Judea, yeah. A New Mexican is just recently Mexican. That's right. A New Mexican lives in New Mexico and New Jersey. What do you call yourselves? Yankees? Jerseyites live in Jersey, whatever it is. A Judean lives in Judea. Now, who lived in Judea? It happened to be the Jews that lived in Judea, what we today call Jews, but they didn't say, hi, I'm Jewish, I'm a Jew, I'm Judean, is what they would have said. And they probably, if you were to ask them, well, they might have said, I am of the circumcision and I live in Judea. But what about those who are of the circumcision who didn't live in Judea? Remember Paul, when he went to Ephesus, he went to the synagogue. When he went to Thessalonica, he went to the synagogue. What did these people call themselves? They did not call themselves Judean because they were not Judean. In fact, many of them had never been Judean. In fact, if you want to look at Acts chapter 2, it says, let's see, where is it? Verse 7, they were amazed, marveled, saying to one another, behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? Not Judeans, they're Galileans. Were these Galileans Jews? Yeah, they were Jews. Peter and whatnot, they were from Galilee. So aren't they all Galileans? And how now, and how hear we every man in our own language wherein we were born? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, dwellers in Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, it goes on. Now, all of these people that were from everywhere, they were in Jerusalem to celebrate or to observe what? The day of Pentecost, which was a Jewish holiday. It was a holiday of the circumcision. So these Parthians happened to be Parthians of the circumcision. But they weren't Judean, they were Parthians, right? And the Medes lived where? Probably, modern day Iran, Babylon. The Elamites, dwellers of Mesopotamia. Do you remember in Washington we have a river called the Potomac, depending on how you want to say that, which is the Greek word for river. So it's called the River, Potomac River. Meso is in between. So here's people that live in between the rivers. The Rio Grande and the Mississippi. Yes, the Tigris and the Euphrates. You're exactly right. But these Mesopotamians are of the circumcision. These Judeans are of the circumcision. That's who's there having the observance of the day of Pentecost. So when we come back here, not of the Judeans only. So us whom he hath called, he called the circumcision. Not only those who lived in Judea, but also of the nations, really is the word, the ethnos. Again, Gentile is the word that came out much, much later. In fact, even after the word Jew came about, it was about the 12th century, I believe it was, that in the English language, the word Gentile, meaning not a Jew, came about. Paul did not have a word that meant not a Jew. He could not have written the word Gentile for today because there was no word Gentile for today. There was the word uncircumcision, or those not of the circumcision. So I'm convinced in chapter 9, verse 24, he's not talking about Gentiles at all. He's talking about those of the circumcision, not only who live in Judea, but also of the nations. Also all those Jews scattered about. Now, who were the Jews that were scattered about? They were the Jews, I would say, to shorthand it, they're the 10 tribes. So he's saying the whole house of Israel here is how it would have been said in the Old Testament, the whole house of Israel. The 10 northern tribes, those of Judea, which was the name of the southern kingdom here, and completely in the Greek, I think, he's saying, I want to talk to you for a moment about those of us who are called, the entire house of those of us who are called. Those of you who are in the northern kingdom, who are now scattered about the nations, I'm including you in. And he said, I will call them my people, which were not my people. Before I get there, let me give you just another couple of acronyms that come up so often. And if you've listened to me preach the last year or two, you keep hearing me say these things. But Jew, Gentile, the word saint is another one that's such a modern word that you can't get the definition of saint from the dictionary and understand the scripture. You try to put that together and you're gonna mess up, because saint is a modern word that in the scripture means the holy ones. So you got to figure out who are the holy ones. The word church, actually, we've talked about a number of times. The word church is an anachronism. Today, when we talk about going to church, it is an exclusively Christian thing, right? The Jews don't say, hey, let's go to church. The Muslims don't say, let's go to church. The Hindus don't say, let's go to church. They all have a different name for where they go. And so it's only Christians say, let's go to church. But there was no word like that when Paul was writing. There was no exclusively Christian word. And why? Because there was no church. There was no thing like we have today until obviously at the close of the New Testament, as this new thing was coming up together. So we've got all these acronyms, which again just makes reading the Bible far more difficult, doesn't it? Wouldn't it be easier if you just understood it to be Jews and Gentiles, and then we can go on with our replacement theology, or at least our sort of morphed view of being grafted in, and just leave it all at that. But the problem is we have to go, again, not to what we think it means, but to what it means. And the only way we really know what it means is to ask the author. He's the guy that can tell us. And so to do that, we have to look at, okay, what exactly words did he use, and what did the words mean in their historical setting? And in their historical setting, this is not what he meant. He meant the whole house of Israel right here. So us whom he called, that is the whole house of Israel, which tells us from chapter 9, verse 24 onward in Romans that we're not just talking about the southern kingdom or the Judeans. We're talking about the whole thing that's given there. Now, actually, the word Jew that came up later, the word Jew is one of those words that today does mean the whole house of Israel, doesn't it? Both Jews and Gentiles, as we use the term today. If you were to ask them, Boaz might come up and say, "Hi, I'm Jewish," and then we might want to know, well, what tribe are you? And he would give us an answer and tell us. I'll save that question for when we're in Israel. But he would give an answer and telling us that, hey, the word Jew is the whole thing now. And so I think the word Jew is this, not of Judea only, but also of the nations. And, even today, if you're familiar with modern Judaism, they talk about the Sephardic Jews and the Ashkenazi Jews. Well, doesn't matter. Here he says, the whole kit and caboodle. That's Yiddish. The whole thing I've got right here. So he's speaking about this. And I will call them my people, which were not my people. Now, what we want to do here is, no, I can't go on yet. I keep backing up before I get there. Talking about these anachronisms, saints, Jews, Gentiles, church. One of the things I'm beginning to notice, this is not exclusively true, but one of the things I'm beginning to notice is that almost every anachronistic error either has to do or gets very close to the replacement theology issue, where we have created a language that makes us to be the new Jews. And so, again, saint, that's one of those that we've talked about. And church, all of these these words that really include us into the assembly or into the nation or into the holy ones, wherever, include us where we shouldn't be, and it's because we created this language. Now, probably that came about because that kind of theology came about before the English language came about. And so when we created the English language, we just the committee for the committee on the formation of the English language, they already had this replacement theology deeply inbred in them, and so our language itself comes with that kind of heritage. I don't know, and it would be interesting to do someday, and probably I will just let one of you do it because I doubt I'll ever get to it, but to see if other languages, especially more ancient languages, are as replacement theology oriented in their Christian words as the English language is. I don't know, honestly. Spanish is a Latin language, and it would use words like iglesia, which comes from ecclesia, but iglesia is only used for a Christian gathering today. It doesn't mean an assembly of any kind. So at least in Spanish, seems that it has morphed that way. But Spanish is a Latin language, and Latin came out of Rome, and Rome's the originator of replacement theology, so we'll have to go somewhere else. A non-Latin language, a non-English language. How's that? You can study Chinese and tell me. I bet you don't know the Chinese word for Jew, do you? Okay. It's your homework assignment to my daughter-in-law to figure out the Chinese word for Jew and Jew and Gentile. See if they have one. Okay, now moving over here, I will call them my people, which are not my people. Again, let's look at it in Romans 9:25, so we get that whole verse, and it says, "As also in Hosea, I will call them my people, which were not my people." Here is a principle that I think is very important. When you find a quote in the New Testament, you cannot dissect that quote from its original context. So, the original context in Hosea of them which were my people, they're going to be not my people. That was completely about what we would today call the Jewish people, right? So you can't dissect that and say, now it's about the Gentile people. It's got to carry its context over. And this, as difficult a principle as it sounds, is one that very much helped me in understanding both the Old Testament and the New Testament, because I would find these quotes that seemed to me to be out of place. You probably found some of these. In fact, I say things like, you got to use a scripture in its context. And then I would run across Paul, who's quoting things that seem to be totally out of context. And what I realized is, no, he's in context, I'm out of context with him. That once I realized where Paul was coming from, it aligns perfectly with the Old Testament scripture, and that does become a great example that's given. So any of the Old Testament quotes, go back and read the entire context in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew scriptures, I should say, and find out what that context was, then carry that forward and read again into the Greek scriptures, and I think you'll find, oh, wait a minute, what he's saying was not what I originally thought he's saying. He's actually lining up. So I think that what we've got here is he's giving this quote, I will call them my people, which are not my people. We've got to bring the context over. The context of Paul's quote is solely Israel, the context in Hosea. So the application, therefore, cannot be now this is the church. It would be a gross misuse of Paul's writings and of Scripture. So we have here something that I think, are the Gentiles the new Ami? No, they're not. The Gentiles are a new thing. Well, no, I shouldn't even say it that way. The church is a new thing, but the Gentiles are not this new thing. Romans chapter 9 and 10 and 11 is saying, I'm going to bring the whole house of Israel in, and those of the northern tribes who were for a time called not my people, they are going to be my people again, is what he's saying.
You just answered my question.
Good. I could see it written on your hand when you're So, yes, the Jewish people, and especially the 10 tribes, but in a sense, I think you could say all of them, whether they're from Judea or from the Gentiles, there was a time in which he put them under punishment. And in fact, let's even go and say they're still there. They're not his people today. They're out there right now. They are either sinking in the sea, to use the Jonah illustration. They're sinking in the sea of the wicked, or they're about to be swallowed up by a fish, or maybe you could say they're in the belly of the whale. I'm going to save that more for the days of the tribulation, somewhere in there. But they're here sinking in the sea, and we're just blessed with smooth sailing waters, and we're the non-Jewish sailors that are up and borrowing a little bit, stretching. We're the ones giving our sacrifices unto God and giving our vows unto Him, our allegiance unto Him, all the while they are not His people, just like Jonah is not His prophet at that time. But He's going to pull them all together to rescue them. And that's what Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11 is about, saying, it might look like right now God has failed in His plan to use the Jewish people, but don't give up just yet, because those who are lo ami will be ami. They will be my people again. Those who are not my people will be my people. Questions? Thank you. Tom?
I did have a cross-reference in here on Acts 15:14, which talks about the calling of the Gentiles. It seems to use similar language, and I think it maybe at times have been used as for James is going back and say, God has called out for Himself people from the Gentiles. I think some might use to support the idea that
Yeah, and taken for them a people for His name. To this agree the words of the prophet, as it is written, I will return and build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. Now, here's where I would pursue if I was studying this particular passage. So he does use an Old Testament quote. Where is it? As it is written. Okay, the words of the prophet as it is written. So we have a quote here beginning about 16. After this I will return and build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. We could look obviously and find out where that's quoted from Amos. Okay. So then what I would say is let's go back to Amos and figure out when he says I'm going to rebuild again or build again the tabernacle of David, what's he talking about? I have a feeling here he's talking about rebuilding the Jewish empire of David, the Davidic empire, the Davidic kingdom, if you will. And so then going back, say, well, if in Amos he's literally talking about a Jewish kingdom here, how do we have Simeon here who has declared how God at first did visit the Gentiles and take out of them a people for His name? I would say, well, wait a minute, is this really talking about going to the uncircumcised and making a people for His name? Or is it actually saying Simeon had declared how God did at first visit the nations and pull all these Jews from the nations in order to rebuild the tabernacle of David, which the tabernacle of David, of course, was the entire house of Israel. So I would argue this really the same thing that probably here, and again I would have to dig into that a little deeper, but probably he's not talking about he did first visit the uncircumcised.
This is going back to Cornelius, Peter going to Cornelius in Acts 10, and then this is the council in Jerusalem. Anyway.
Yeah.
Where they're debating whether they need to be circumcised if they were Gentiles.
Yeah.
They were the uncircumcised, not the circumcised in the nation.
Let me see if I have sheet notes.
He's obviously calling, James seems to be using to say he's calling Gentiles out, but that I don't know that it necessarily means that is necessarily supporting what some might say that the church is now Israel.
Yeah. I'm going to read what I said once.
Okay.
I don't know if I agree with myself. White versus white. But I'm going to read what I said once here anyway. This is on Acts 15:15, and I know it's several years old because it's connected to the New American Standard Bible. So then I said, it's very important to recognize that James does not say that Peter's work was the fulfillment of the prophets, but rather was in harmony with the prophets. There are those who teach that the Jews believed that only Jews would be saved, not Gentiles. R.C. Sproul, for example, see his teaching on 1 John 2:2. Such was never the teaching of the Jews. Here, James reminds his Jewish audience, in the hearing of the Gentile audience, that the salvation of the Gentiles does not invalidate any Hebrew prophecy. In fact, according to Amos 9:11 through 12, the passage being quoted, all the nations will be under his name. This harmony with, rather than fulfillment of, is also seen in Revelation chapter 22, verse 6. So I think what I said there is that in the argument of the context, what James is saying is it's not a problem that now Gentiles are coming in. That this is part of the revealed prophecy that was given. And James is saying, in a sense, the kingdom is beginning to be established, or God is establishing his kingdom. Now we should be expecting the Gentiles to come in. James was not fully aware at this point. He was being made aware in Acts chapter 15 of Paul's revelation of what was happening. So I'm not sure he totally connected it there. But yeah, interesting stuff to dig into that I don't fully have the answer for. And lost my place there. With that, what time is it? 3:52. Okay. So we are going to take a little break because we're going to see our movie. And let's see, I believe the instruction is that they do need the room entirely empty for a moment. So we're all going to go out in the hall eagerly awaiting and purchasing the tickets to see the show. And they're getting the live animals ready, and I'll give a little introduction of it. So how long do you need us out of the room? They just need us out for about 5 minutes. So if you're grabbing a snack, grab it quick. We'll come back in the room and get settled in after they get everything fixed up, but take a bathroom break.
I goes over this meaning the whole house of Israel.